The member for Sandringham.
Acting Speaker, thank you for the call. I rise to address the Government State Taxation and Further Amendment Bill 2024. I note the time of the day being 3:23 in the afternoon of a Thursday of a sitting week, last sitting day of this sitting week, with just over an hour and a half to go before the government's guillotine kicks in, where, as ordinarily we'll vote on the government bills for this week. I also note, Acting Speaker, that from an opposition perspective, we have 12 very keen colleagues of mine who wish to speak on this bill. And because this bill is a state taxation amendment bill, and because this government knows that whenever matters of the economy or matters of taxation really fair dinkum do not favour them, whenever these topics are spoken of, they leave it until the very last minute of the very last sitting day on the second last sitting week of the year to bring this on. Now, I fully intend to contribute for the next 28 minutes and 55 seconds. Following that, my colleague, the member for the Leader of the Nationals, will. Then we'll probably get to the member for Bulleen. I hasten to add that the member for Eildon, the member for Gippsland South, the member for South West Coast, the member for Kew, the members for Ovens Valley, the member for Narracan, the member for Warrandyte, the member for Mildura and the member for Morwell will not have the opportunity to, because of the way this government has chosen to manage their government business program. It's just not right, Acting Speaker. It is just not right. That just because matters of the economy and matters of taxation are a bit of a sore point for this government, and just because they choose to manage their government business program in such a way that it actually limits debate and the time for debate on this important bill before the House today, that a number of my colleagues miss out on the opportunity to speak, that is just not right, it is just not fair. But over the last 10 years, Acting Speaker, the member for Bentley is not in his place. He's being very disorderly at the minute.
The member for Bentley knows that if he wishes to interject, it should be from his chair.
Because the government has brought this bill on so late in the piece, a limited amount of my colleagues will have an opportunity to contribute to it. Now, I wish to say from the very outset that the opposition will not be opposing this bill. We will not be opposing this bill, but I'd like to go through in some detail how we've come to that position, and in some detail the clauses that are considered within this bill as well. Of course, this bill seeks to make a number of amendments to existing tax acts in relation to the government's health tax, in relation to a number of property taxes, in relation to a repeal of an exemption for friendly societies, in relation to foreign purchaser adjustments, and I intend to go through some of those in some detail now. Acting Speaker, at the very outset, I think a valid question to ask is this. Can the Victorian government, can the Victorian Labor government under the leadership of Premier Jacinta Allan, who have now been in government for 10 years, be...
Point of order, Minister.
I can speak. There seems to be a consistent pattern of members of the opposition referring to the Premier by her name rather than by her correct title.
The member for Sandringham will be reminded to use the correct terms, please. Thank you. When referring to members.
Point of order, Acting Speaker. If I refer to the Premier as Premier Jacinta Allan, is that an unparliamentary way to refer to the Premier?
I believe that using names is not correct in the lower house, in the Assembly, and we use titles. Thank you.
Well, in relation to the Premier and her leadership over the last 10 years, as a senior member within the Andrews and now Allan Labor government, the question really needs to be asked, can Victorians trust this Labor government when it comes to managing Victoria's economy? Acting Speaker, you see, Victoria's economy at the minute is, and I've described it in this way before, I'll describe it in this way again, it's an absolute basket case. It is an absolute and utter bin fire. We have the greatest amount of tax in this state, the highest amount of taxes, the highest amount of business taxes, the highest amount of property taxes, the highest amount of debts at $188 billion. $188 billion. The most amount of debt of any state in the nation. We're paying $26 million a day, each and every day, in interest payments on that debt. That's money
that we can't actually invest in the important services and infrastructure that our community so desperately needs. That is the state of the economy after 10 years of Labor and after 10 Labor budgets. And just today, the Australian Bureau of Statistics confirms that for 7 months straight, Victoria has the highest unemployment rate of any state in the country. For 7 months straight. This is what you get after 10 years of Labor and after 10 Labor budgets. So when it comes to tax reform, when it genuinely comes to making life easier for Victorians and not harder for Victorians, the genuine question needs to be asked, can Labor be trusted? And frankly, Acting Speaker, I contend the answer to that is an absolute big, fat no. Now, Acting Speaker, as I mentioned at the start, this bill covers a number of amendments to various acts. It covers amendments to the Tax Act, and specifically in relation to Labor's health tax. Now, we've got a long-held position when it comes to Labor's health tax. We're opposed to it. And yes, we acknowledge that this bill goes some way to making access to bulk billing appointments in this state easier. We do acknowledge that, but it doesn't go far enough. You see, because it only applies to general practice, Acting Speaker. It doesn't apply to all allied health or all primary health. It doesn't apply to dentists. It doesn't apply to physios. It doesn't apply to podiatrists. It doesn't apply to psychologists. It only applies to GPs when they bulk bill a patient. And that means that there will be more Victorians who are unwell, who, because of Labor's health tax, can't actually afford to see a doctor, can't actually afford to pay to see a doctor, and will end up lining up at an emergency department that is already overrun because of the way that this government has managed the health services over the last decade. We know that it actually costs more to the Victorian taxpayer for a Victorian to turn up to the emergency department of a public hospital in this state. It costs about $500 for a Victorian to turn up to the emergency department of a public hospital in this state. And that is the price that Victorians will need to pay because Labor can't manage money and can't manage our health system. Non-bulk billing GPs and allied health professionals will still face Labor's crippling health tax, which means the impact of Labor's health tax continues to threaten the viability of clinics across the state. In fact, the Australian Dental Association Victorian branch, Acting Speaker, said in correspondence to the opposition, the government is leaving dental clinics across the state calculating whether they will have to close or how much they would have to charge patients to cover a possible tax debt through no fault of their own. Let me repeat that for the sake of those opposite. The Australian Dental Association Victorian branch has said, quote, the government is leaving dental clinics across the state calculating whether they will have to close or how much they would have to charge patients to cover a possible tax debt through no fault of their own. There are hundreds, quite literally hundreds of medical practices, medical clinics right around the state who operate on a mixed billing model that will now be subjected to Labor's health tax. That is going to make healthcare more out of reach for many, many Victorians. And the only way for Victorians to have certainty when it comes to Labor's health tax is to boot them out in November 2026 and to elect a coalition government, because our commitment is really, really clear, really clear. We have said that we will reverse Labor's health tax. We've already tried to do that in the other place. We've already tried to move a bill in the Legislative Council to effectively knock out Labor's health tax. But, of course, the government is not interested in that. They're not interested in that at all. And, in fact, they've voted against it. And that's why, Acting Speaker, I now move that all words after that be omitted and replaced with the words that this House refuse to read this bill a second time until the government commits to a payroll tax exemption for all medical and allied health providers. This is a very, very important amendment which I encourage the government and those in the crossbench and the Greens and the people up there to support, because it is the only way, that it's the only way that that Victorians can be assured that they will not be paying additional dough for healthcare, which, you know, it's a practice within this state. There's a universal understanding in this state that access to universal healthcare should be a right of citizens. But no, because the Victorian government is in such a poor economic state. The injustice of this is they're seeking to make the economic circumstance and the circumstance which they've created over the last 10 years the fault of Victorians by imposing on them more taxes. 55, Acting Speaker, new increased taxes in the last 10 years alone, 29 of which are on property. I've said it before, I'll say it again, if you tax something more, it doesn't get any cheaper. If you tax something more, what happens? It gets more expensive. A little bit of more active participation would have been welcome at that point, but I understand why that wasn't the case. But I'll say it again. If you tax something more, it doesn't get any cheaper. If you tax something more, it gets more expensive. And 55 new increased taxes over the last 10 years has meant the cost of living pressures on Victorians has gone up and up and up and up. And for the people on the government side of the chamber, Acting Speaker, actually say they care about the impact of the cost of living crisis on Victorians, well, if they did actually care, they wouldn't seek to impose more taxes. They'd seek to repeal more taxes and to live within their means. But we know that that is simply not within their DNA. Simply not within their DNA. Acting Speaker, it's not just the health tax that is amended in this bill, or that's changed slightly in this bill. It's also changes to property taxes. The government proposes to extend exemptions from vacant land tax to bereaved families winding up estates and to properties on alpine resorts. We think that makes sense, Acting Speaker. But the question that I have is, well, why did the Labor government expect people in this circumstance to pay more tax in the first place? You know, if they'd actually thought about it, if they considered it, if they spoke to the community about it, they would have known that the land tax exemptions to bereaved families winding up estates and to properties on alpine resorts, I would have thought that in the government's consultation on these matters, these sort of cases would have come up, and they wouldn't have legislated those changes and those impositions in the first place. But no, they did. They did, and they're back here seeking to now include those as exemptions. Why did it's a question that I think is a valid question to ask. Why did Labor expect that grieving families pay residential land tax while winding up the affairs of a loved one in the first place? Why in the first place did this Labor government consider that was a good thing to do? And despite these modest exemptions, which we do support, the government's property tax regime will still continue to punish Victorians. As I say, Labor has introduced some 29 new property taxes over the past decade. 29, Acting Speaker, it's a familiar number. I think I read that, Member for Polwarth, was it number 29? Did I read that in the paper earlier this week?
29, could be 30.
Was that Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday I read the number 29. Yeah, that's right. That was
Polling results.
Polling results, Member for Polwarth. Absolutely. That was a Premier's polling result, 29, which just happens to match up to the amount of new property taxes that this Labor government's introduced over the last 10 years.
So there might be a reduction in taxes coming.
Oh, well, you know, we can only hope, Member for Polwarth. Look, we did go to the government, Acting Speaker, on with a number of. Thank you. I thought it was quite a good routine. We should do morning radio. I did go to the government. With a couple of questions in relation to the imposition of their taxes, and I asked how many GPs are employees as opposed. This is in relation to the health tax. How many GPs are employees as opposed to contractors, and how many are trainees? I also asked how many private clinics don't fully bulk bill? What is the proportion of clinics which only bulk bill, and where are they located? And the reason why we asked these questions on behalf of the opposition, but also on behalf of the Victorian people, is because we'd like to get a sense of who and how many people are being affected by this, and the consideration that the government has given to their health tax before imposing it upon Victorians. So how many GPs are employees as opposed to contractors, and how many are trainees, and how many private clinics don't fully bulk bill, and what is the proportion of clinics which only bulk bill? And on both occasions, the government's returned serve and said, and the member for South West Coast will be fascinated by this answer because she was on the briefing with the bill briefing with the government and various departmental officers. On both occasions, the government's come back with the following: the Department of Treasury and Finance does not have access to private clinic data and, therefore, relies on publicly available data sources, which may vary in scope, timing and level of detail. In relation to the question in relation to private clinics, and if do they fully bulk bill or otherwise, the response from the government was DTF does not have access, DTF, that's the Department of Treasury and Finance for those playing along at home, does not have access to clinic level data on patient bulk billing practices. Available data on the proportion of patients and the proportion of services bulk billed is provided below. So on both occasions, there's been an acknowledgement by the government here. The Department of Treasury and Finance does not have access to private clinic data. DTF does not have access to clinic-level data. So, I think it's an appropriate question to ask, and it's a valid question to ask. If they don't have the clinic-level data, using what data have they actually modelled that the changes in this bill will be what they say they could be? If you don't have that baseline data, how can you assert something? They go on to say, we asked another question: what is the impact on rural GPs? The government expects that the decision to provide an exemption for payroll tax for payment to contractor employee GPs in relation to bulk bill consults will support more bulk bill GPs consultants for Victorians and improve access to GP services, including in rural Victoria. But how can that assertion be made if, in the first place, the government acknowledges, or at least the Department of Treasury and Finance acknowledges, that it does not have access to clinic-level data? So how can you make that claim seriously without having access to the clinic-level data? I would have thought that would be a very important thing to have access to. This bill also repeals the exemption for friendly societies, which is, in our view, a new tax burden on friendly societies, which are not-for-profit mutual organisations focused on community services, including affordable housing, health services and retirement savings. Friendly societies, as I'm informed, have been tax exempt due to their role in supporting the common good through affordable healthcare and financial services. We are concerned by this change, but on balance, we've decided to not oppose this bill for reasons that I've previously stated. Acting Speaker, I can come to my initial point, which is, can this government truly be trusted to deliver upon tax reform in the first place? No. And the answer that I have to that question is a big fat no. Okay. Because if they could be trusted to deliver true, lasting, meaningful, impactful tax reform, then why are we in the state of affairs that we are currently in? The highest taxes in the nation, the highest property taxes in the nation, the highest business taxes in the nation, the highest unemployment in the nation, now 7 months running, the lowest credit rating in the nation, when we've got a circumstance where property is out of reach, where housing is out of reach, where the cost of groceries is going up, where the cost of power bills is going up, where you pay more in this state than any other state in the country to send your kid to a state school, at the same time as our educational outcomes are flatlining, if not declining, in some areas. These are all cost of living pressures that families are experiencing right now. And for the life of me, I cannot understand why this government just doesn't bite the bullet and do something meaningful when it comes to tax reform. Of course, it'll take a coalition government to do that, Acting Speaker. It'll take a coalition government to do that in 2026. But of course we're not waiting, Acting Speaker, till 2026 to have a fair income conversation with the Victorian people about our plans for this state, for them, for singles, for families, for older Victorians, for great Victorians. There are no ordinary Victorians, Acting Speaker. They're all great Victorians with great stories, and we value them and we respect them because their contribution to this community should be valued and should be respected and currently isn't. We're not waiting until November 2026 to speak about how we would govern this state, the opportunity that we would seek to create in this state, to indicate to Victorians just some of the things that we would do to improve their lives and to make their lives easier. In July last year, Acting Speaker, you may be interested to know, you also may not be interested to know, but it's my speaking time, so I'll carry on. We launched a tax discussion paper, and that was our opportunity to talk to Victorians about the impost of taxes on the lives of Victorians and Victorian businesses over the last decade. And what we've heard, and what we heard during those consultations right around the state, including in Gippsland, was not good. Was not good at all. Victorians are buckling under the pressure of state government taxes, and high inflation caused by a poorly planned big building project, which is turning into a big bill that all Victorians will have to pay the price for. And what Victorians want is a government that they can trust, a government who respects their money, a government who values the taxpayer money that Victorians earn, Victorians hand over to their government. They want that money treated with respect. They want a government that actually understands what integrity is. And that's why just in the last couple of weeks, the opposition, the alternative government in this state, Acting Speaker, announced our plan to better manage Victoria's money. It's the first of a three-stage plan that we are starting to announce and will complete before the election. And the first pillar of this plan is a charter of budget honesty. The second is a public expenditure tracker, and the third is an intergenerational report. Three things that we think are very, very important, because we know in the opposition benches that it's not our money. It's not our money. It's Victorian taxpayers' money. It's not the Liberal Party's money. It's not the National Party's money. It's not the member for Sandringham's money. It's not the member for Gippsland South's money. It's not. It's the Victorian taxpayers' money. It must be treated with respect. It's a basic principle. Basic principle. And so we think that we have an obligation to increase financial integrity in this state. So that's charter of budget honesty in the first place is a very important first step to say to the Victorian people that we respect the money that you give us. We will treat you with respect. We will treat your money with respect. We will manage your money better. I'm looking forward, I'm quite excited by the transparency that will be offered by a public expenditure tracker. So Victorians can see firsthand where their money is being spent, how their money is being spent, in what area their money is being spent. This is information that's already there, collected on a monthly basis, made available by department, and which simply needs to be collated and made publicly available. Transparency is not a bad thing, especially after 10 years of Labor, especially after 10 Labor budgets. It's a good thing, and I think it will be appreciated by the Victorian people. And finally, the final stage of that particular plan that we announced a couple of weeks ago now was the establishment of an intergenerational report, an opportunity for us to understand the impact of decisions we make now, not just on our current day, but what that looks like in the future. So important to plan for the future, Acting Speaker, and to make sure that the Victoria that we create now doesn't leave the next generations of Victorians worse off. And sadly, I'd contend that under this government, after 10 years of Labor and 10 Labor budgets, there are many, many generations who will be worse off, because it's those generations that will have to pay the price for the poor economic management of this state that has been imposed upon the Victorian community under this Labor government today. As I said earlier, Acting Speaker, $26 million a day, each and every day, in daily interest payments. It's akin to going to an ATM, backing up a big budget rented truck, pulling out $26 million, chucking it in the back, driving it to the front steps of Parliament and setting it alight. That's effectively what, because Victorians get nothing for it. Victorians get nothing for that $26 million. In my community, in the member for Northcote's community, in the member for Hastings community, in the member for Box Hills community, in the member for Belton's community, in the member for Gippsland South's community. Just think about it. What about the member for Footscray? In the member for Bentley, who's out of his seat again. $26 million a day, each and every... that would be transformational for our community. At least, I hope we get a non-partisan agreement on that. If you had $26 million in your community, it would be transformational.
Through the chair, please, member for Sandringham.
I think he was. Acting Speaker, if you had $26 million in your community of Monbulk, it would be transformational. If I had $26 million for my community of Sandringham, it would be transformational in that community. I know exactly what I would do with that. I know exactly what I would do with it. I would call the principal for the Beaumaris Primary School, the Beaumaris North Primary School, and I'd say to them, you remember those school halls that the government promised you when you reached a certain student level that has never been delivered? That have never been delivered? So much so that when the sun is beating down upon the heads of your students and the rain is beating down upon the shoulders of your students, that you've got nowhere to have a whole school assembly or to have community sport? I would say to them, you've got those school halls, and that would be transformational for those school communities. I know that. And every member of this place knows what $26 million would mean in their own communities. But no, each and every day, we're rolling up to the ATM with a budget rented truck, taking out $26 million, setting it alight because of the way this economy has been managed. Labor has managed the Victorian economy over the last 10 years. That $26 million could pay for 128 ambulances. 128 ambulances, 2 breast cancer centres, 2,715 elective surgeries, or the yearly salaries for 315 nurses, 510 Victoria Police recruits, or 305 paramedics. It's not monopoly money, it's real money, it's Victorian taxpayers' money, and it's not being managed in a respectful way. And if Labor understood, if the Labor government understood that, they would manage things in a different way, but they don't. They're too set in their ways. Arrogance has set in, hubris has set in, and the Victorian people are picking up on this. Just have a look at Tuesday's front page of The Age. There have been over $40 billion in blowouts under this Labor government, $40 billion. The North East Link of $21.2 billion, the Westgate Tunnel $4.7 billion, the Metro Tunnel, $13.8 billion. Things don't just cost what they cost. What an attitude. What an irresponsible attitude to have when it comes to the management of public funds in this state. But of course, that's what we get under this Labor government. 55 new increased taxes, a government that really say they care but just don't. Acting Speaker, there is a better way. There is a better way. There must be a better way. There must be a brighter, more optimistic future, more hopeful future for this state. I hate to say that we will not get this under the Allan Labor government. The Victorian people are twigging to this as we meet here this evening. Under a government that we lead, there will be lower, fairer, simpler taxes. We will respect Victorian taxpayers' money. We will enable business to thrive, not just to survive, but to thrive. That is very, very important to us. We will scrap Labor's holiday and tourism tax. We'll scrap their health tax. We'll scrap their schools tax. We will establish a Charter of Budget Honesty, the first state to do so. We will establish a real-time government spending tracker. We will commission Victoria's first intergenerational report. We will end waste. We will say to businesses, those who have recently left this state for other states or those who have recently closed down in Victoria that, again, Victoria is open for business again under a government we lead. We will scream that from the rooftops. We will introduce a legislated debt cap in this place after 10 years of Labor, after 10 Labor budgets. Victorians are waking up each and every day to the economic havoc that's been wreaked on this state, and they deserve so much better.
The member for Box.